There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am outside. Yes, my gout is getting better to the point where, because this is the only little jaunt, the only little walk I plan to do all day, I decided, yes, I could hobble along. I'm still hobbling, walking about a quarter of my natural speed. But when I go out, make one trip, it's not inflaming, it's not making the pain worse for the rest of the day. I tested that out yesterday going to the grocery store and the bank, so I think I'm on the mend enough that things are looking up. I moved all of my teaching online this week just to give my foot a rest, and that helped. But I am, I think, ready to go back out as long as present trends continue. So thanks for all your warm thoughts, and enough about my aches and pains. Let's get to all the pains and aches and joys of reading this week. It's been an interesting week. So it's lovely to be outside. As I always say when I sit at this very green spot, I can only sit here on a cloudy day because otherwise the sun is just too obnoxious. So here I am. I have finished 5 books. A couple of them were short children's books. Why don't I start with that? Beverly Cleary died. And, you know, I want Canadians, especially of my kind of generation, if there's any of you out there still alive, to weigh in on this. But I didn't grow up with Beverly Cleary books. And I'm certainly old enough. She started publishing in 1950, didn't she? But the name was always vaguely familiar, but I don't remember seeing her books in the library or whatever. And I never read them. I had never read anything by Beverly Cleary. I don't think she was really on my radar until her 100th birthday, so, 6 years ago. And she died last week. And I decided, because again, my foot was hurting, and boy, I'm realizing now that when I'm in pain, I need children's literature to make me feel better. It's just this weirdest thing that's developed in my reading life. I've never had that kind of thing before. Maybe other people read romance novels or whatever, and I shouldn't be poo-pooing what anybody needs to make them feel better and give themselves a boost. But quality children's lit, middle grade or whatever, works for me. So I have read 2 Ramona novellas really, by Beverly Cleary. And the thing that made me just fall into it and say, I have to do this now, is that the audiobooks are narrated by Stockard Channing. She's one of my favorite actors, mostly because I've only seen her in 2 things. I've seen her in my favorite movie of all time, 6 Degrees of Separation. I saw her in Grease, and who cares about Grease, but I became a devotee after 6 Degrees of Separation, and then she was really great, but she had kind of a role that didn't put her talents forward really in West Wing. And that's all I've ever seen, but I just love her. I love her voice. So she narrates most of the books by Beverly Cleary, so I did 2 this week as an audio text combo, occasionally only listening, but because I wasn't going out walking anywhere, I also could follow along in the ebook. I didn't do them in chronological order, and I am going to start doing them in order. So the first one I did was Ramona Quimby, age 8, and what an absolute delight. I mean, 5 stars. Who cares about the star rating? It was just, she's so good. The story was just so... And Stockard Channing did a really good job of dramatizing that lazy, resistant, sleepy voice of a child that age that is something that I never really had to think about, because I don't think about 8-year-olds. I don't have any reason to think about 8-year-olds. But just I did, listening to this book and reading along, because Ramona just was tired and resisting anything that might remotely smack of chores or whatever. And the way that Stockard Channing's voice brought that to life was a delight. I don't think I need to say very much about Beverly Cleary. You probably have all read her. I am very late to the Beverly Cleary party. May she rest in peace, and I am going to read them all. So I did 2 this week. I don't think I'm going to do 1 next week. I'll wait a bit, but they are all there on Scribd for when I'm ready for the next one. So then I went back and did the first in the series, which is Beezus and Ramona, and I didn't enjoy it quite as much, but it was still awesome. And everybody has been saying, but I haven't had any reason to listen to what people were saying about Beverly Cleary's stories, that they just were about everyday people and the situations and The drama couldn't have been more ordinary, and she does it just beautifully. In a way that, yes, there is a kind of a message or whatever, but it spoke in a heartwarming way to this old geezer who was nursing his aches and pains this week. I love Beverly Cleary's writing. I want to read absolutely everything. I want to read her memoirs. I want to make up for lost time. It's a second childhood for Sean the Book Maniac. So that was awesome. Also awesome, the highlight of the week really was finishing Edna O'Brien's debut novel from 1961, I think, The Country Girls. The first in her Country Girls trilogy. Just a perfect novel. This is Edna O'Brien coming out of the gate. Her debut novel. It's the best coming-of-age novel out there. Changed my mind. And it caused such a scandal, and this is a buddy read with Sonia of An Enthusiastic Reader, and we talked about it like it's not that controversial, but of course Ireland was very different at that time. The way that it alludes to sexuality and sexuality outside the confines of the patriarchal family unit, so sure, very controversial. The characters are not likable, it's not sentimental. I don't mean that they're hateable, although certain readers might not like them in that way, might dislike them, but Edna O'Brien didn't go out of her way to create likable characters, and I love that about her fiction. There was a realism and a humanity that encompasses all of the ugliness in the human soul in a way that's sexy and fascinating, and she's just such an amazing writer. You will never get me to shut up about Edna O'Brien. So I am also delighted to announce that while Sonia and I had originally thought we would space the 3 volumes of the Country Girls trilogy over a year or more, we have decided, no, we're just going to keep going. So we're starting the 2nd volume immediately. So stay tuned for that when I get to that point of the program today. The last 2 I'm not as enthusiastic about. They were both 3-star reads. I didn't end up liking Red Rosa, the graphic biography of Rosa Luxemburg, all that much by Kate Evans. I didn't hate it, but Britta said it's a lot of philosophy, and I said, oh, it's political philosophy, that's different. But no, it's not very different. I was bored to tears by how far down in the weeds that went. She was an incredible intellectual, and I wasn't all that impressed by her intellect because I don't think that those ideas are very important, or, I mean, they're obviously. Here goes Sean the Book Maniac saying the stupidest things, but, you know, it's how I make the big bucks. Of course, the ideas were important, but I don't think that we should valorize them today because, you know, Marxism is stupid. But she had an interesting life of the mind. But this is the thing. I didn't like the way that the biographer tried to make what little of a personal life she actually had interesting or relevant, because I just think it was so tertiary to her incredible mind that I kind of resented the time we spent with her personal relationships because I don't think they mattered very much. And here's the thing, and I want people to comment on this because I do not have a fully formed opinion about it, but it really bothered me that we saw Rosa Luxemburg naked on so many of these pages. Why did we need to see Rosa Luxemburg having sex? What was that? I guess it was meant to balance out our preconceptions that she was just an intellect. She just was an intellectual force, and that she wasn't a woman, or she wasn't a person. But if it had been a graphic biography of Lenin or FDR, whoever, would we see them naked having sex so much? Like every time, I think she probably only had sex 7 times in her life, and all of them were dramatized with full-page spreads of Rosa Luxemburg spread, and just, am I being a prude? I don't think so, but what was that about? I didn't like it. It's like, so, tell me, what was it for? And, like, obviously, if it had just a written biography, we wouldn't be having a description of what she looked like naked, but so why did we have to look at pictures of her naked having sex? I thought that was just strange. I didn't like it. So 3 stars. Didn't really care for that book very much. Now, some of the artwork and stuff was beautiful. I think a lot of people don't like, from what the Goodreads reviews, a lot of most people don't like the art, didn't like the art style or whatever. I thought it was fine, and certainly it was very realistic of her face and her head. I don't know how realistic it was about her breast, but it's all there. I still think this is not the form to tell these kinds of stories. I mean, it was so text-heavy and, pondering long Marxist stuff, quotations from her writing and stuff that were just, I don't think it was really the form for this, but I'm not a big fan of the form of the genre. So I'm glad I tried it, and one and done. I don't need to read any more graphic anything for a while. And this morning I just finished Tea is So Intoxicating by Mary Essex, which is a pseudonym for Ursula Bloom. And this is the first one I've read from this British Library Women Writers series that has just been being published, originally a 1950 novel. I gave it 3 stars. There were things I liked about it in a 4-star way, and there were things that I really disliked in a 1-star way. There was some humor in it, and I had the first laugh out loud moment in my reading life that I've had in years. If you like middlebrow fiction, I think you should give it a try, but if the things that I don't like about middlebrow fiction, I really didn't like here. The premise is that this newly married, kind of frumpy, unromantic British couple in post-war UK decide to start up a tea house. Well, the husband does. And he is so incompetent that it's just meant to go awry from the word go. And that's the story. And the people in the little town that they relocate to, the little village, don't welcome them. They don't want a tea house. And the story goes from there. There's a scene where this bumbling middle-aged man, David, makes lunch for some friends that he's hoping will invest money in the tea house that is comic and made me laugh out loud, which almost never happens. But then, and this is what trips me up with this kind of fiction, is then it seemed like the story was trying to get more serious, and there was a whole bunch of characters and a whole bunch of storylines, and some of them worked as comedy, but when more serious things, there was a whole bunch of accidents and injuries in this book, and some of them were rather serious. And so then I felt like emotionally I'd switched gears from just laughing at all this stuff to, oh wow, but I didn't really care enough about the characters because there just wasn't enough character work here. And really all of the characters were not much more than kind of stereotypes. So I found it really frustrating that the plot got so intricate and parts of it got so serious, like unhappy marriages and explorations of sexuality and class divisions in the small village. If it had been solely treated comically, that would have worked for me. But when it started to try to get more serious in this really melodramatic way, which made me realize that I just didn't care enough about any of these people to be invested in any serious stuff, the book started to fall apart for me. So I didn't really think it was very good, but it had its moments. And if you're not as put off by all of that kind of genre-bending, characterologically flimsy dimensions of what middlebrow fiction can be, you might like it a lot better than I did, but I thought it was just so-so. Now, there's an afterword by Simon Thomas, who is a book blogger, and he's a consultant, I think, for this series. And I enjoyed his afterword far more than I enjoyed the book, because he situates it in that post-war moment. It was published in 1950 and was set maybe 1948 or something. And he talks about all of the different social things going on, but with rationing and the emergence of tea houses and all of the things that post-war Britain was the breakdown of class, at least a little bit, and many things like that he talked about, and then drew my attention to those parts of the story, and that was interesting. So it's a 5-star afterword on a 3-star novel. So that's what I have finished. Finished 5 and I've started 5, so parody. I have read maybe 40 or 50 pages of this new work of historical fiction by Lucy Jago, A Net of Small Fishes, just published this year. I'm enjoying it a lot. I like the writing, it's really vivid, and what I want to talk about is spoilers when it's based on historical events, because I was not familiar with the historical events, and I wondered, the synopsis and stuff, it's really minimalist, and I was kind of complaining about that when I talked about it last week, and then I realized why. The synopsis, and I believe maybe even the Goodreads synopsis, goes out of its way to not spoil the plot. There is a cast of characters, and I started Googling them quite early, and then realized that they were historical figures. It opens in 1609 at the court of King James I of England, who was King James IV of Scotland, I believe. And as soon as I started Googling the characters, the first person protagonist is Anne Turner, and she becomes friends with the Countess of Essex, Frances Howard, who is the young wife of Robert Devereux, the Earl of Essex. And they're all connected to the court of King James in various ways, based on where they find themselves in the class hierarchy and so on. I Googled the characters and soon stumbled upon what I think is the plot of this book. It's a dramatic event in the history of this period. I think it's called the Overbury plot, and that's not referred to at all on the back of the book or in the inside or whatever. So I read enough to realize, okay, I've just spoiled the story for myself, but I have this, I think it's just, dementia or something. The one common noun is still in my mind, but the other details I read, I have completely forgotten. So if you don't want to spoil the book, if you care about that, it is based on history, but maybe for people in the UK, it's common knowledge. It certainly wasn't for me. I'd never heard of it. But if you want to go into this book blind, don't Google anything about it. I don't think it's probably going to end up being as good as Hilary Mantel, but it's reminding me of how much I loved falling into that world. Lucy Jago is creating a world of these upper and middle class and royal personages that is immersive. King James, I'd forgotten. I had kind of forgotten, I guess, that he was a big homo. So his parading around with his boyfriend, and his wife isn't very happy about that, and I've gotten quite fascinated with Queen Anne of Denmark, King James's consort, and also fascinated, there's been a few references to how the members of the English court were having trouble understanding all the Scottish king and his entourage's thick Scottish accents, and I'm really fascinated. I hope there's more in the book, but I want to learn more about all that. And yeah, so far, I mean, it's early days, but so far I am quite enjoying it. Beautiful cover. Very tactile. Heidi of My Reading Life and I have started this chunky work of Canadian history, or Indigenous history. The Northwest is Our Mother by Jean Teillet. The subtitle, The Story of Louis Riel's People, the Métis Nation. I talked about it last week. I'm not going to say much. We've just read the introduction and the first chapter, which was very short. I think we're going to keep going at 2 chapters a week. It's popular history. It's not academic history, which is good for us both. And it's so early that all I can say is it's starting out great. And by the end, I should be able to talk about the Métis people of Canada, an important part of Canada's Indigenous fabric, without sounding like a bloody idiot. So, it's quite a lot to ask, but this is a big book, and I hope that it'll do the job. Starting out really great. Are you kidding me? Okay, well that's lovely. I have my second old iPad, which I use to look at my Goodreads and stuff, so I don't have to do much prep work. I just turn the camera on and kind of fly by the seat of my pants, because I have the second iPad. When I left the house, it was at 48%, and it's now powered down. It's old, so I don't know if it's going to power back up. Okay, it came back up. Now it's at 52%. Go figure. No, it went off again. Okay, so I'm going to have to do the rest from memory. I may have to add some addendums back at home, if things I forget. So I've started 3 for Aussie April, I think 3. One is The Yield by Tara June Winch. This is a buddy read with Greg of Supposedly Fun. So Greg, if you don't want to hear anything about this till we check in next week, fast forward. I love it. I've only read the first 2 chapters because it's early days, but certainly they immediately grabbed me by the collar. So the first chapter is told in the voice of the Indigenous Australian man Albert Gondiwindi, and his life project has been to create a dictionary of his native language, which so far I don't think has been named, and then he dies. And in the second chapter, we're introduced to his daughter, and she had left the small town, and it seemed like there was a lot of family kind of separation or conflict or whatever, and gets the news that her father has died, and she goes home. And that's all that's happened so far. But there's just something, the sentences just kind of come out like water. Like there's just something very light but resonant about each and every sentence. It's just beautiful writing. That's all I can say so early in, but wow. Eager to continue. I'm a little bit further than that into The Slap by Christos Tsiolkas. Holy smokes, this is a page turner. I've read 30 pages and it's just from the first page really engrossing. So as I said, it's about there's a family barbecue. A man slaps a child who is not his own child, and that it sets all the wheels in motion of the story. And I'm reading about that family barbecue, and every time I turn the page I think, oh, is this the page where the slap's gonna happen? And I'm just, which man is gonna slap which child? And it's really, there's a suspensefulness to it, a drama. I hear people say sometimes in praise, often as a criticism, that the characters are so unlikable. I'm not finding that so far, but they're really sharply and in just a few strokes defined. Like, I know and can feel the energy of each character and each kid, even though I've only read 30 pages. It's so interesting. I mean, I don't know what else to say. It's really early. I'm glad I started it because it's a long novel, but it's not a novel that I'm going to have any trouble picking up on a regular basis because it's just fascinating. And I have started My Brilliant Career by Miles Franklin. Again, just a couple chapters. This is a buddy read with Kim of Middle of the Book March. We are checking in next week. So Kim, if you don't want to hear my preliminary thoughts, but they're very positive. It's kind of reminding me of Anne of Green Gables, only in the sense that it's written around the same time. And it's a feisty young girl. But the comparison stops there. She's living with her parents and they move from one kind of pioneer settlement in Australia to another one. I remember that the other one is near Bambara. I think I'm remembering that correctly. And her father is an ambitious farmer, maybe rancher. It's told in her voice, and her voice is quite interesting. That's really all I can say about that, but it's holding my interest in the early chapters. So that's what I have started. So in terms of what I've started, I have a really good feeling about it. I will say I got lots of comments about the Peruvian novelist Mario Vargas Llosa, and several recommended a novel of his as being his best, and it was not set in Peru, and I've forgotten what that novel was because I don't have a working iPad. Here is the cover. That is probably one that I will read, but I am, and I don't think I need to apologize for this, but just like I don't really care about Edna O'Brien's books that aren't set in Ireland, I don't want to read Llosa's books that aren't set in Peru. Like maybe eventually, but those would be the last ones I would want to read. And his books about Peru don't interest me, and it seems like the big Peruvian male writers, they wrote such manly books that just my eyes glaze over when I read the plot synopsis. So I have another idea, and I didn't quite, like, I'm secretly reading it. It's not on my Goodreads. It's not by a man. I haven't done enough pre-reading to know whether it's going to work, and I thought I might tell you about it today, but I'm not ready yet. Stay tuned. But the male writers of Peru were too macho for Sean the Bookmania. So I didn't start that one. So here's what I'm planning to start. In no particular order, because now that my iPad has gone off, I'm just so flustered, I'm just gonna go with it. I am going to start this collection of short stories from Australia by Elizabeth Harrower, A Few Days in the Country and Other Stories. I hear she's a great writer. I don't know anything about her other than that she passed away last year. This collection was published in 2015, and holy, look at that with my blouse, hey? I have a good feeling about it. I have decided, what the hell, this is such a little book, I'm going to pick this up too. Iwaki Kei's Farewell My Orange, translated from the Japanese by Meredith McKinney. And so this is a story about two immigrants, Salima from Nigeria and Sayuri from Japan, who are living in Australia. I have been hearing good things about it for years. It's time to get to it. Greta and I finished our buddy read of that very unsatisfying, well, it was certainly unsatisfying for me, collection of Japanese fiction, and now we are starting I'm so happy Britta agreed to read this because I didn't get to it for Black History Month, and that is the short story collection Gorilla My Love by Toni, Cade, Bambara. I can't wait. This is a book that I just wanted to get to this year sometime, and so there's no time like the present. It is a book that I bought after hearing Eric Carl Anderson. I think he just hauled it. I don't know if he ever read it. I can't remember, but I heard about it on his channel. The Mating Habit of Stags by Ray Robinson. Ray Robinson was born in North Yorkshire. His debut novel, Electricity, came out in 2006. And this is about, I should probably save this for Springathon, but I have a bunch of other stuff I want to get to in Springathon. So this will be in anticipation of Springathon because the main character is a widower in his 70s. He's a retired farmhand, and he walks the beautiful, austere moors of North Yorkshire trying to evade capture. Apparently the writing is really beautiful. I will let you know. I got ahead of myself last week when I said that I would be starting this buddy read with Jyotsna of Jyotsna's Bookscapades because our first check-in isn't until tomorrow, so I haven't started it yet. This is No Presents Please by Jayant Kaikini, translated from the Kannada language by Tejaswini Niranjana. Published by Tilted Axis Press that put out these really attractive works. I think all of them were translated. This was the first one I've ever read, I think, from Tilted Axis Press. I can't wait to dive in. There is a readathon, and sorry, I don't know what the readathon's called, but it's of translated Indian literature for the whole month of April. So this will be one thing that I'll be starting. I didn't say in this video that we're going to do a story a week, so we won't finish it. So I'm also going to start this one, which I think my last book haul, I talked about it. I filmed that book haul 6 months ago, but those of you that saw it just saw it recently. Another work of translated Indian literature, and this one is rather historical. 6 Acres and a Third by Fakir Mohan Senapati, and it was translated from the Oriya language by Ravi Shankar Mishra, Satyapi Mohanty, Jatindra K. Nayak, and Paul St. Pierre. And it was published in 1901, and I believe that would have been in the Oriya language, and this translation is new. I paid $50 for this paperback to special order it. I saw Jyotsna add it to her TBR and said, I want that, and that was when I was in my book buying binge during the pandemic last year, where I had all this disposable income because I wasn't going out or, going to restaurants or whatever. So I ordered this for $50. It better be good. It sounds really good. Set in an Indian village under colonial rule, I say, Orissa, during the 1830s. Senapati, the writer, he died in 1918 as a relatively old man, and he was born in a small village in Orissa. He was a poet, a novelist, an administrator, a social reformer, a printer, a businessman, and a patriot. Okay, this is just an addendum, so I did forget to say, after alluding to it at the beginning of the Alfresco Friday Reads this morning, that I will be, in fact, starting the second volume in the Country Girls trilogy, continuing the buddy read with Sonia of An Enthusiastic Reader. And volume 2 goes by 2 different titles, The Lonely Girl, or, in some editions, Girl with Green Eyes. It's The Lonely Girl in the edition that I'm reading it in, and so that's what I will call it, but it has, for some reason, 2 different titles out there, and I can't wait to dive in. And, it's ridiculous how many I'm planning to start, but, sue me, because I'm going to start one more, and I can turn the camera off and check Goodreads, so that's what I'll do. All right, so I just turned it off to double check my notes, and I hope I can keep it in my brain long enough to spit it out at you. Didn't sound very good. The last book I'm planning to start is for Invisible Cities. One of the countries this month is Vietnam. So I have found a novel that I believe was published in 1936. I think so. It's called Dumb Luck. The English title is by Vu Trong Phung, and I'm sorry I don't have the translator. I'll put it at the bottom of the screen. It's on Scribd, so I'm going to read it. All right, so yes, I've turned the camera off a couple times to try to look up more about it. So it was published in 1936, and it's set in the colonial era, and it's about the Europeanization of probably the Frenchification of Vietnam. That's all I know, but it sounds really interesting. So I've got my reading cut out for me in the coming week, and I'm starting to feel a little bit better day by day, and even when I'm not feeling better, I'm very comfortable and pain-free when I'm sitting in my chair reading, so yeah, life is pretty good. I hope you can say the same for yourself. Thanks for watching.